Okay, today we're going to start the first unit. Our first unit in Math 30-2 is on set notation and set theory. And in this unit we look at how we can describe sets in different ways and use Venn diagrams to help us sort out the information. This unit's pretty short and most people find it fairly easy, so it's a good one to start with to get your mind back in math. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start the unit, and you can see in the notes here I've got a picture out of the textbook on page 6, so if you want to use your book you can sort of follow along. We'll cover some of the same stuff. So what we're going to look at is we're going to use Canada as sort of our starting point to look at how we can define sets. So you can see on this map it has every province and territory in Canada. So the first definition that we want to worry about is called the universal set. So the universal set in this case is every element or every province that we're talking about. So in this case the universal set would be all of Canada. So you can see the notation we use is little curly brackets, and we list all the provinces. So BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so on. So the entire universal set of Canada then is the 10 provinces and the 3 territories. Okay, you'll see in this case I called it C, just C for Canada, but a lot of times in questions that we do that really don't have anything too much to worry about, we just use U for the universal set. Okay, so that's the first definition. Elements then are all the parts of that set. So in this case, all of our elements would be BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so on. So for example, Alberta is an element of our set Canada. And then a subset is just a smaller set that belongs to a bigger group. So if our universal set's all of Canada, we could say then the western provinces are then a subset of Canada. So just our western provinces, which are typically just those ones there, would be a subset. Or we could also do, let's say we want to do the Maritimes. So the Maritimes would be the 4 East Coast provinces. Or for whatever reason, let's suppose we wanted to do the territories only. So then the territories would be just those 3. Okay? Or we could also say we want to do all provinces east of Manitoba. So then maybe we call the eastern provinces all of those ones. So Ontario, Quebec, and all the Maritimes. So then you'd see we have a whole bunch of subsets. So in this case, the western provinces are a subset of Canada, the territories are a subset of Canada, the eastern provinces would be a subset of Canada, and the way I drew it out here, the 4 Maritimes would be a subset of the eastern provinces, which are also a subset of Canada. So subsets are just a smaller group within the larger group. In terms of notation for subsets, so you can see I rewrote the smaller ones. So here we got the western provinces. So the western provinces were BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And we would say that those are a subset of Canada. So the notation we use for subset is like a sideways U. So it's kind of a longer, skinnier U, but it's like a sideways U shape, not a C. So you want to make it sort of long and skinny. So sometimes people will write it bigger just to make sure that it's clear that we're talking about subsets. So in this case, we'd say, yeah, western provinces are a subset of Canada, or we have the Maritimes are a subset of Canada, so that would be the same way. Or like on the last page, I said that we have the Maritimes, we could say, are a subset of the eastern provinces, which are also a subset of Canada. Okay, so you can write them as more than one in a row if need be as well. Okay, the next definition that's pretty easy is complement, and the complement is things that are not in the set. So in this case, we'd say the complement of the western provinces would be all of the provinces and territories that are not in the west. So if we went back to our map, you'd see it'd be everything except for the green western provinces. So then the western complement then would be the eastern ones, Ontario, Quebec, all the maritime provinces, plus the 3 territories. And you can see on here I called it W with a little prime or tick beside it, and that's the way we notate for complement. So for example, if I wanted to list the complement of the territories, we'd write it as T when we put that little prime beside it to show everything but the territories. Okay, the next definition is empty set. So an empty set is basically exactly how it sounds. We have a set that has no elements inside. So for example, if I said what Canadian provinces belong to the United States, we'd say there's none. No provinces in Canada belong to the United States. So there's two different ways to write this. Sometimes you'll see it as just a set of the curly brackets with nothing in it. So that's one way, but more often what we're going to use is a 0 with a slash through it. So that's going to indicate that we have an empty set and there's nothing involved. Okay, a couple more definitions that we'll go through quickly. Disjoint. So a disjoint set is when we get an element that has, or two sets that have no elements in common. So for example, we'd have our western provinces and we have our maritime provinces. None of them have elements or provinces in common, so we'd say those are disjoint. There's no notation for disjoint. We just would say west is disjoint from M. And let's just do one more quick example. Would the eastern provinces be disjoint? Oops, spelled it wrong. Disjoint from M. What do you think? East disjoint from M? And that one is no, because if we go back to our map again, you'd see that our maritime provinces, the orange ones, are part of the eastern ones. So we'd say, no, those aren't disjoint because there are some that belong to both. The maritime provinces belong to both. So we'd say no to that one. So that's false. Okay. And the last two that are pretty easy to understand are just finite sets and infinite sets. So a finite set would be any kind of set that has only a certain number of elements. So for example, our province example that we're doing here, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories, and that's it. There's nothing else. So that would be a finite set. An infinite set are ones that go on to infinity. So if I said list all of our integers, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up to infinity, and also 0, -1, -2, -3 to negative infinity, so that would go on and on forever. So an infinite set has no ending. The other one that another example is multiples of 2. So if I said list the multiples of 2, you could write those out as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and so on. And it would go on and on forever. So that's another example. So that would be multiples of 2, or if we wanted to do prime numbers, let's just do one more quick one. So if I said, what are the prime number elements? A prime number, in case you forget, are all numbers that only divide by itself in 1. We don't include 1, so we would start at 2. So 2 only divides by 1 and 2. 3 is the next one. 5, 7, 8 divides by 4, 9 divides by 3, so that doesn't work. 10 divides by 2 and 5. 11 would be the next one. 13, and so on. So that would be another infinite set because they go on and on forever. Okay, so that just gives you it for the key definitions. So we're going to be using these words, especially disjoint and subset and things like that. We're going to be using those definitions a lot, so if you ever forget what they are, you can always go back to here to look, or there are definitions in the book and examples and stuff like that as well. Our last thing we're going to look at for this first unit is how we can use Venn diagrams. So when we're dealing with sets, quite often Venn diagrams are a good way to help show us what the set looks like. Often it saves us a lot of work because we can just draw a quick little sketch and put some numbers in. So it'll make the question a lot easier to understand, but it'll also help us with calculations and so on. So let's do a simple Venn diagram for this example that we just did. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways. Sometimes we actually write the Venn diagram with all of the elements. So let's do that first. So let's say we use a box to show the universal set. So in this case, we'd say that universal set is Canada. And then we'd say there's a subset within Canada. So we usually just write a circle inside, and then you'd list all of the elements that are inside that. So that'd be Alberta, BC, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. So the 4 western provinces. Then we'd say, let's say there's another eastern circle, so that would be all of our eastern elements. Okay, but then remember within the eastern elements there was the 4 maritime, so let's do those as a separate circle. So inside those ones let's put New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland. And then the only other two provinces that in the east that we didn't include so far is Ontario and Quebec. And then the only other thing we got left to worry about is the 3 territories. And let's just leave it circles. Let's not put the territories. We could do another set if we wanted to. We could just say there's the 3 territories, but I'm going to show you sometimes you just have elements that aren't included. So let's suppose we just wanted to use a Venn diagram to show the Canadian provinces only. So we've got our 4 western provinces, we've got 6 in the east, 4 of those are Maritimes, and then let's just say the territories we're just not going to worry about. Those are going to be, because they're territories, not provinces, we'll just ignore them. So what we do is, Mrs. Barker, so what we do with the territories is we just show them on the outside of the circle. So Yukon, Northwest Territories, and none of it. So that would be a good way to show all of the data that we did with all the curly brackets, to put that inside a Venn diagram. I mentioned earlier that often we use Venn diagrams and we'll just use the numbers instead of listing out all the elements, and usually that's faster and easier and we can do calculations a lot better. So let's show our, actually I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's show our Venn diagram for Canada once again. So we'll stick with this exact same example. So we'll do all of Canada. Okay, so this, in this case, our universal set, remember, was Canada, and we're going to say that it had 13 elements. It had 13 provinces and territories. Okay, so Canada equals 13. Then what we do is we'll say our western provinces had 4, and then often we'll show our eastern provinces having 6, and then within the eastern we had Maritimes. There was 4 of those as well. Okay, and then we just had our 3 territories that were on the outside, so we can just show a 3 like that. Okay, so quite often it's a good way to just sort of summarize it into a smaller amount. Other times when you're drawing the diagram, you might want to just even ignore the title. So you might even just say 13 on the outside. We could call this west and put a 4 inside. And we could call this east and Maritimes, put a 4 for the Maritimes, and then 2 other eastern provinces that are part of the 6 that aren't in the Maritimes. So a couple different ways of drawing it, and it really doesn't matter how you would show it. Okay, so let me erase this one. I'm going to go back to sort of just our main one, because we're going to do some questions now of looking at some different ways of notations and how to write questions. Okay, so let's do the first one. So if the question said, how many elements? Okay, so I was saying we're going to look at the number of elements in each of these. We'll be able to answer some questions. So the first thing you can see here is the way I type the questions. So often they'll be written as how many elements. So the notation we'd say is we use n, a small n, and then the brackets. So when we say number of C, that means how many elements are in C. And in this case, C is our Canada. So we have 6 eastern, 4 western, and 3 territories. So we'd add up all of those numbers, 6, 4, and 3. We'd say there's 13 elements in all of Canada. Okay, the next one there says, what's the number of west? So that's just our 4 western provinces. So we'd have 4 for that one. What's the number of the west complement? So remember, complement was everything except for the west. So we'd have the 6 in the east, 3 territories is 9. Don't include the 4 provinces, so we just have 9. So the 4 western, then there's 9 provinces and territories that aren't western. Okay, Maritimes, remember, Maritimes was just the 4 of the east. So that one would be 4. And then the next notation you see I got E/M. So the way we do that one, it's just a short way of saying how many provinces are in the east but aren't maritime. So E/M means east but not M. So in this case we have 6 provinces of the east, but we don't want the 4 So then we would just want those two extra ones, Ontario and Quebec. Okay, so that's a new notation, so the E/M, and then a few other ones that we're going to look at. We'll spend more time in the next lesson dealing with these, but we can take a look at a few of them. So now if we could combine these, we could say what are the number of elements in the west or the number of elements in the east. So we have 4 in the west and 4 in the Maritimes. Sorry, I said east. So west or Maritimes. We have 4 in the east, 4 in the west, and 4 in the Maritimes. So or would mean how many would we have in one or the other. So we would add those together and we'd say there's 8. So we have 8 west or Maritimes. Okay. If the next one now, it almost looks the same, and you got to be a little bit careful with the way it's worded. So this one says now how many are in the west and in the Maritimes. So the key words you want to be careful of when you're dealing with this is the words or and. Okay, so the first one was west or Maritimes. We have 4 in the west, 4 in the Maritimes. You can be in one or the other. So therefore you'd have 8 different choices or 8 different provinces you could go to. Now it says and, so we want to know how many are in the west and in the Maritimes. And because there is no overlap, right, those circles are totally separate, we got different provinces, we'd say 0. There's none. There's none that are in both the west and the Maritimes at the same time. And we could also do, let's do one more, we could also do it where there's subsets. So we remember Maritimes was part of the east, so now we're saying how many are in the east or in the Maritimes. So east is 6, Maritimes had 4. Do we add them in this case? No, because those 4 are already part of the 6. So east or Maritimes in this case would just be the 6. All of the eastern provinces together, because Maritimes are part of them, we wouldn't really worry about that, and we'd just say our answer is 6. Okay. If the question was how many are in the east and the Maritimes, so then we'd want the ones that are in both, so that would be just the 4 maritime provinces instead. Okay, let's do one more different example and then we'll stop there for this first lesson. So let's look at one now where I say the universal set are all the numbers from 1 to 10. So just simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's our universal set. So now we could say we have an even number. So let's do even. So that would be 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 would be our even numbers. Then we could do odd numbers. Okay, and let's do 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 would be our odd numbers. And let's do another one to show primes. So our prime numbers would be, so let's just list these so we don't mess up. So our even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 for evens, odds 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then primes. Remember 1 isn't a prime, so we say 2, 3, 5, 7. That's it. So we have 2, 3, 5, 7 are the only ones that are primes. So how we would show that, you can see because we've got 2, 3, 5, and 7 are already on the board, we're not going to write them twice. It doesn't make sense to duplicate them. So then what we do is we would just draw a circle showing sort of an overlap. So we get an overlap of both of those. So that would be our primes, 2, 3, 5, 7. And we don't have any other numbers that don't belong, right? They're either one or the other. And then we could even do more groups if we wanted to. If we want to do a subset of, say, multiples of 5. So if we wanted to do that, then we'd just have another smaller group of 5 and 10. Okay, so there's different ways of sort of showing these. You can always use Venn diagrams to have it. So the Canadian province ones, we had sort of disjoint sets. Remember our west was disjoint than the east. So like in this case, we'd say our east subset is disjoint from odd. So even and odd, E and O are disjoint because there's no overlap. But then we'd say the even and primes are not disjoint because that number 2 is in both circles, then they're not disjoint. Or even and multiples of 5 are not disjoint, and so on. Okay, so that should give you a good enough idea how this works. What we'll do is we'll stop there and then we'll do some practice questions.